Hi everybody, in this presentation I'll be talking about bibliotherapy and be doing a quick review of children's literature, specifically in reference to personality development and social moral development. And we're going to just kind of go through what the purposes of these types of children's stories are and break down the different themes of the different types of books. So here's a learning outcome associated with the content in this week's module. Analyze and articulate how a variety of children's books stimulate the cognitive language, personality, and social moral development of children based upon constructivist and psychosocial theory, and evaluate potential impacts on the formation of stereotypes of bias and racism. And so, just a quick review from your reading. I want you to be thinking about, in reference to social development, how does a young child's egocentrism impact his or her social development? So, what are the factors that impact children's social development? So, some things to consider are when you think about what egocentrism is, that's the inability to decenter, the inability to take perspective, and the ability or skill to take perspective takes longer to develop. So some children and some adults that you probably know are still developing this ability to see from someone else's point of view. And so when you think about that and how children relate socially to others, it really has a lot to do with how they view themselves. And some of the factors that impact children's social development are things like their race, their class, their social economic status, their lived experiences, and the moral development from the reading and from the presentation that you viewed in the module. It has a lot to do with how we experience the world, and young children view the world as very cut and dry, very black and white. When somebody gets in trouble, it's because they did something wrong, and children value right from wrong maybe differently than we as adults who have the ability to see rules in a different perspective. And so social and moral development, we can teach these themes or these concepts through stories and the books that we present to children. And so it's your chance to move away from just books that are cute to books that have a real theme, a real moral to the story. And so your goals for teaching, you should be thinking about the purpose of the children's literature differently than if it were just cute, right? So sure, I remember reading to my preschool children Skippy John Jones. I still remember reading Goodnight Gorilla. And because they were fun stories, they were fun, heartwarming, joyful stories, and that's great. We should have those fun, joyful, happy stories, but we should also use our children's literature to teach children concepts and themes about humanity, about the world around them, so that they can learn about themselves and learn about the people that they are living with, or the people who they are engaging with in the community. And so I hope that this module and this week's topic does change your thinking about how children's literature is used in the classroom. And then also be thinking about the differences between books that support personality development and books that support children's social moral development, because it's two different ideas. And here's how I remember the difference. When you think about books that promote personality development, you're really selecting or finding books that get children to reflect about themselves, that offer the message, I am worthy, I am capable, I am lovable. And then social moral books help children see themselves in relation to others and help them understand that other people have a different perspective. And so as you're reading this week, if you've already done the reading, be thinking about the differences between personality development and social moral development. And now if we're moving on to a different topic, called Bibliotherapy. And maybe you've heard about bibliotherapy, but just as we use books to teach about social moral development, personality development, we can also use books to heal. And so there's this statement by Darla Ferris Miller, and she said, Bibliotherapy is the process of using books to help children think about, understand, and work through social and emotional concerns. Reading with children can be therapeutic. Adults can use reading to help children come to grips with issues that create emotional turmoil for them. Reading can also be very effective in preventing and resolving problem behaviors. And so the whole purpose of the content of this week's module is to use books to teach and to heal. So there's a difference between clinical bibliotherapy and developmental bibliotherapy. We are really thinking along the lines of clinical bibliotherapy in this class. And we use those books, we are considered helping professionals to help children deal with significant emotional or behavioral problems. And we're going to break those down in just a minute. And then developmental bibliotherapy is used by teachers, librarians, or lay helpers to facilitate normal development and self-actualization with an essentially healthy population. And what this means is more along the lines of books that support social moral development and personality development. So I want to distinguish the two. Clinical bibliotherapy are books that we use in a therapeutic setting, in a therapeutic way. And we read those books one-on-one with children, or we send those books home with families to read. It's not something we might read in a large group setting unless we're addressing community trauma or a trauma that everyone in the class has a common shared experience around. Otherwise, a bibliotherapy book in a clinical setting means that it's used for an individual case-by-case basis, where developmental bibliotherapy is used to teach like different types of developmental skills. And there's a couple of different subtypes of bibliotherapy. Families with special needs and families in crisis. And so families with special needs are stories, you would select stories that give factual information about a special need. So for example, my oldest son has autism, and for my younger son and for my other children, a storybook about siblings who are learning to understand their sibling with autism, or likewise, a book about autism to help my son understand his diagnosis would be a book that supports families with special needs. This should model positive and appropriate interaction with and or support for individuals with ability differences. And so this might mean a story specifically about a child in a wheelchair and how the wheelchair is their mode of mobility, or a story about a child who is deaf and hard of hearing interacting with their hearing peers, but a book to teach about a specific special need. And again, this is not a book you might read to the whole group at one time. You don't want to call out or stigmatize a child's disability, but it might be something you send home with the family to share with siblings, or it might be a book that you read with a small group of children who are learning about and wanting to understand their peer. And then families in crisis, I'm just going to throw this out there, a preschool-aged child whose mother is having a baby, it might feel like a crisis to that child, right? A new child entering the family. Oh my gosh, I'm not the center of the universe anymore. That might be a crisis for a young child, but it is not the type of crisis that this type of book is addressing. Families in crisis literally means divorce, death. Some may even consider a sudden active duty parent leaving on deployment as a crisis, right? There's a loss of a family member. It's an uncertain amount of time that they may be gone. But this should give hope to the reader. It should model positive and appropriate interactions with and or support for individuals or families in crisis. It should affirm an emotional response to a crisis and give hope for successfully dealing with the crisis. So books can be therapeutic. They can help. They can make or help children not feel so alone in what they're going through, and also can be healing for parents. just to read a story. I've often read stories that are marketed and produced as children's books, but when you really listen to the theme of the story, you know it's written for adults. Um, and so they can be therapeutic for us as well. But you have to consider some things when you are selecting books for bibliotherapy. You have to think about what you're comfortable with and what you are uncomfortable with. For example, if you're selecting books about a specific special need that frightens you, I know that sounds terrible, but I've had students say that in the past, like, I'm just so scared, what if I mess this up? Take some time, get to know the book, get to know the diagnosis, get to know what you need to know to feel secure with in order to share the book. Or if it's, let's just say, you yourself just lost a loved one and you're supporting a child in your classroom who also just lost a family member, it might be too raw and too current and real for you in that moment to share that book with that child. But you may send it home with the family. And so you have to think about what you're comfortable with, and what you're ready for, and then what steps can you take to be ready. And what you have to think also what you would be very cautious about. And then if you had to teach someone about bibliotherapy books, I want you to think about what you would say, especially for that family member who is like, well, why are you sharing this book with me? I don't understand. So be prepared to talk about what the purpose of bibliotherapy is and how we share these books as a way to heal. All right, everybody, have a great week. I'll see you online.